Gentlemen, welcome. Oh, here we go. There we are. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Patriots Whistle, blowing the whistle on far left ideology and the communist takeover. Today's guest is Mr. Wrightstone. He is a geologist and published author of the book Inconvenient Facts. Welcome, Mr. Wrightstone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. And it seems like the climate change craziness is getting more intense week by week and day by day. I mean, it's just been crazy, the things that have been going on in terms of the hoorah over climate change. And we can go through some of this. We can go, tonight I hope that we'll be able to go through some of the inconvenient facts that your listeners don't know, and then we can go through and I can expose some of the really big climate change lies, like we'll talk about the Amazon fires, the supposed mass extinction that's going on right now. It's not, by the way.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit here in just a little bit about forest fires and wildfires and how you're being lied to. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I like to use science, facts, and data to dispel that. And what it might be good just to start here with would be to tell you and your listeners or viewers why I got into this, because I'm a geologist, as you had said, and I knew as a geologist that some of what we were being told about climate change was just incorrect. It just was. Yeah. And I suspected other things were, but I wasn't an expert. I didn't know. And it was this, what I did was I said, I'm going to start out and I'm going to go back to the base data and I'm going to do my own search for the truth. And it was this search for the truth that led me to writing my book, Inconvenient Facts. And it's just this past week was #1 bestseller on Amazon in 3 categories. So it's people like you and your listeners that get it. They say, oh my goodness, this book is everything I've been looking for, and telling their friends about it. Because I don't have a big I had no advertising, and the book just continues to and we've got a companion smartphone app. Also, we can talk about in a little bit.
Okay, great.
But I'll shut up now and let you ask me some questions.
No, that was a perfect lead into my first question. Is what sparked you to go about and look at this information? And I'm sure it was something similar to my spark, and that's just the misinformation that's out there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you to write this book?
Yeah, well, it was this search for the truth. And as I got into it, when I got to forest fires and wildfires, because I just assumed, as probably all your listeners do, that forest fires were increasing and it was because of climate change, because that's what we've been told. It's just flat out. And it's not so. It's just not so. And if we look at the data, the factual science behind this, we find that globally, well, let's just talk Northern Hemisphere, because the Southern Hemisphere is a little bit different critter. We'll get into that maybe. But the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, there's a lot of intentionally set fires by subsistence farming and things like that. We'll talk about the Amazon coming up. So, but in the Northern Hemisphere, we've seen a long-term decline in the number of fires in the area burned. And the experts from the Canadian Fire Service and in the United States, the National Interagency Fire Service, they tell us that this long-term decline in fires is actually because of climate change, believe it or not. It's counterintuitive that you would have a decline in fires because of rising temperatures, but that's in fact what we see. It's a combination of rising temperatures that has a slight increase in precipitation, and then that's turbocharged increasing soil moisture because of soil moisture increase because of increasing CO2 means that plants don't need as much water. They're not breathing in. It's called transpiration. They don't breathe in and out as much, so they're not losing as much water, so they're not requiring as much water. So CO2 increase which has been demonized, is actually benefiting the earth in many ways. And one of that is an increased soil moisture that alleviates forest fires and wildfires, and also serves to alleviate drought conditions, which have actually been in decline.
Right. Okay. So as you were unfolding or delving in, finding this information, something didn't sit right inside of you, and you knew you had to get this information out. And I'm so glad that you did. I mean, just today, my wife got chewed out for asking for a plastic straw. So, and I just find it ridiculous how it's being politicized, one, but then two, being used for fear mongering to bring about, the just removing of fossil fuels and everything that they seem to be demonizing. So, and as I was watching your interview on Epic Times, you went into actually how it has enriched humanity. Fossil fuels and energy has actually shifted us from poverty. And so, can you touch down on that a little bit? Because a lot of people start to paint this negative picture of energy, but in fact, I don't think any of us realize what life without it would be like.
Well, there are two things here, we'll talk maybe later about the many benefits of a warming climate and increasing CO2. What you're talking about really is what we've seen from the increased use of fossil fuels, increased carbon dioxide that's generated from that. And what we see is, if we look back let's take a look back in our rearview mirror of Earth's history and human history. Let's just look back the last 100 or 150 years. What do we see? We see nothing but, by just about every metric, we see that humanity and Earth is prospering greatly. We see much, the EPA just last week released a study looking back at the 2018 data, just showing oh my goodness, how much better the pollution is from just everything they looked at. We continue to improve and improve and improve and improve. We're getting better and better. Every metric we look at life expectancy increasing. Crop growth, we're breaking records year after year after year. We're seeing that crop and food production is outpacing population growth. We see a direct correlation between increasing use of fossil fuels and prosperity. We can compare that with, for example, just using fossil fuels per capita or CO2 production per capita versus GDP growth. GDP versus GDP by capita, per capita is a great metric to be using for assessing prosperity for each country. And there's just a tremendous correlation that the countries that are actually emitting the most carbon dioxide are the most prosperous. And again, what the EPA is trying to tell us that the carbon dioxide is a pollutant, and that was it was called the endangerment finding under the Obama administration that needs to be rolled. I mean, Donald Trump's done some good things, but one of the things that he should have done in his EPA, Scott Pruitt, when he was there, should have rolled back what was called the endangerment finding, where they found that carbon dioxide, they called it a pollutant. It's not a pollutant. It's a miracle molecule that does great things for the earth, and it's benefiting the earth greatly.
And then I heard you say that, something like 4 million people were dying because of inhalation from burning wood, and because they're still in energy poverty. And so the numbers are showing that, these people are more in danger than we are. Am I right?
Oh, that's right. Because if we look we've lifted billions of people up out of energy poverty around the world. There's still a billion plus people living in what we call energy poverty. And what you're referencing there was about 4 million people are thought to die an early death due to lung disease, emphysema, other conditions, lung cancer, because they're cooking over open wood, dried dung in their homes, mostly women. It's leading to, I just looked at a picture of a woman from Nepal, at 35 years old, had cataracts. She was almost blind from cataracts. You don't get that. The reason for that is she's cooking over dried dung in her home, and it's the smoke.
Right.
Children are at risk for pneumonia and other things, and this 4 million deaths are easily preventable by providing them clean burning fossil fuels to use, and the electricity derived from fossil fuels, electricity, propane, natural gas. There's a lot of things they could use that we could directly save 4 million lives a year, and a lot of pain and suffering and childhood diseases. And it's people like Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old activist, she's advocating, and the Pope is advocating to embrace the Paris Climate Accords. Well, what these people are doing are they're relegating and destining these people living in abject poverty to continue just generation after generation of abject poverty when what they really need is affordable, abundant, and reliable energy that can be provided. And India is a great example. Prime Minister Modi he's decided to basically say the heck with the Paris Climate Accords and the heck with this nonsense of reining in. What he says we're going to do is, I'm going to do what's best for the people of my country, and what I'm going to do is lift these people up out of poverty, and we're going to do it by providing them reliable, abundant, low-cost energy. And so they've doubled down or tripled down on building coal-fired plants. We see the same thing in China. So anything we do here will be just it's negligible compared to what's going on in India and China, particularly China. But India is the one I look at because China's doing it because they're China. India's doing it because their prime minister has, and I believe him. He says, "I want to help the people, and we're gonna bring these people up. We're gonna lift them. We're gonna grab by the back of the neck, and we're gonna drag them out of the third world into the first world, or at least the second world. And we're going to do it with coal-fired energy. And we're going to do it and doing it. I traveled to India, and I spoke at one of the first shale gas conferences over there about shale gas development in China. And it's they have some resources there, but they have a lot of their main impediment is really their socialist system, and so they've got that to overcome.
Right.
And hope we don't see that here.
Yeah. So I guess the way I'm looking at it is the very thing that our country's trying to ban, other countries are fighting for, wishing they had, so that they can actually live, somewhat of a comfortable life.
Not enough. India's, but I mean, you look at Germany's coming to a lot of the European nations have embraced Paris Climate Accord. And I think they're beginning to regret it. We're seeing in Australia, there's much green regret because they've had rolling brownouts, and they've moved away from coal, and they're trying to move to wind and solar. You can't do it. You just can't do it.
And that's when the conspiracy theorist in me the wheels begin to turn, and I'm like, is this a power grab? Is this how politicians are using to shut down rich families, rich corporations for some kind of takeover? I'm in Colorado. We have a very far left administration in office, and I work for fossil fuel industry, and we're under attack like never before. And that's a big part of their spiel is ozone, how ozone is causing asthma and it's making people sick. And I even read one article on National Geographic of how it's decreasing life expectancy, and I was like, "There's no way." Can you have anything to combat any of that ozone argument?
Well, ozone. I'm not an expert at it, so I shouldn't talk about it. But I believe ozone levels have been, and I just looked at the EPA data that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
as I recall, the ozone levels are much, much reduced from what they've been, and they're continuing to go down.
Right.
So I don't know what they're talking about there.
Yeah, and I know our VP said we can build 6 units to try to combat this, and it's not us, it's coming from other places. And so a lot of times they're actually trying to combat something that we're not even doing, because it's like waxing one part of the car. If you don't address the other 90% of the car, you're just waxing one spot. And that's kind of how I see these ridiculous policies. But so I'm going to shift real quick. And so you mentioned Greta. Obviously, AOC is a huge voice. Beto, who's on the presidential ticket. But they all have been on record saying we have 12 years to switch. 12 years to switch before it's too late, before we bring about our own destruction. And I just want your response to that madness there.
Well, I think they're kind of right in some ways. Yeah. I think what they've got is that what they meant to say, we have 12 years until we have to set a new deadline.
Okay.
And then in 12 years, they go, did we say that? No, we meant
right
from now.
Yeah.
And, no, because we've seen these deadlines set year after year,
yes,
decade after decade, and they evolve wrong. And I capture in my book that I looked at the UN in 2005, said that there would be 50 million climate refugees by 2010. Well, in my book, I looked at the census data from 2005, and they had identified the most at-risk islands that were going to be underwater by that time. And people were flocking to these islands. They weren't fleeing from them. And then in 2015, the UN had the same prediction that by 2020, there'd be 50 million climate refugees from these same areas. And, we're almost to 2020, and I don't think we've had 50 million climate refugees. No. Not near.
Yeah.
They're trying to claim Central America as an environmental problem. It's not. That's a socioeconomic issue. There's no drought going on down there.
Yeah. And I think I read somewhere that they had clips from, way back to the 70s of these climate alarmists on record saying, the ice is going to be gone and yada, yada. And here we are in 2019. Okay, so what about this? And this is on NASA's website. This whole 90% of scientists agree that man-made climate change is happening. That's the first response I get when I engage in these conversations with people on the left. Is this comment here? Well, 90%, 97% of scientists agree. Is that a fudged number or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because what we look at is that's taken from a study done by a climate alarmist, one of the ayatollahs of alarmism, that John Cook, and one of my editors, Lord Christopher Monckton, he and David Legates, another colleague of mine, actually got the data that made up that study, and they found that it was less than 1% of the people, of the scientists that they included in the study, actually believed that number one, that humans were definitely the principal cause of the warming over the last 100 years, and second, it was going to lead to catastrophic consequences, less than 1%. And they also had 3 categories of scientists that they included in the so-called 97%. They would include me in that 97% because I believe that rising temperatures, increasing CO2, and it's increasing, is leading to some warming of the atmosphere. I believe that because it's a greenhouse gas, and I believe it's leading, but I think it's relatively modest, and I think it's greatly overwhelmed by the same natural forces that have been driving temperature up and down since the dawn of time. And because of that, I would be considered by him as being part of the 97% consensus. And
so they really have to stretch that definition
in
order for them to.
I'm a geologist, so I speak at a lot of geology talks. I'm speaking next week. I'm preparing a presentation now. I'll be speaking at a large convention of geologists. And usually when I speak, there's a near 97 to 100% consensus when I talk, agreeing with me, because we as geologists put things in the long perspective. Right. So I'll be speaking there, and the fellow before me is the title of his talk. He's from Penn State. He's Dr. Michael Mann acolyte apparently, but he'll be speaking. His title of his talk is "The Rock Solid Evidence for Anthropogenic Warming." So anthropogenic means man-made, and then I'm following him up with my talk, which is unusual and unprecedented warming ? And it's the geologic and human history of climate and temperature. So I'm going to be, and then we're going to have a half an hour panel discussion about it. So it should be pretty interesting. And then next month, I've got a debate scheduled for Cornell University, which I'm going in the lion's den there, because Cornell's Ithaca, New York. If you know anything about, they were the hotbed of fracking, anti-fracking nutball. So, I was in St. Louis last year, and Antifa came after me. I had 4 people that got up with loudspeakers. Yeah.
It's a crazy time right now. I'm sitting back watching this cold civil war. People call me crazy when I say that. But when you see what's happening in D.C., man, it's hard not to go there, But, man, I pray for boldness for you as you enter into those hostile environments. And I, if you can reach just a handful of people, it's worth it. If you can wake up just a handful of people, it's worth it. But, man, there's so much information. Can you just give a plug real quick on your YouTube page, your Facebook, where your book can be found?
Yeah, we've got... go to inconvenientfacts.xyz for my website. You can buy the book there, $5 off. It's available at Amazon. Like I say, it was just #1 bestseller on Amazon this past week in 3 categories. It's been huge.
Okay, and
I've got a smartphone app.
Just plug that.
Inconvenient Facts. Just search at both the App Store and the Google Play Store. I think we're approaching 50,000 downloads. Yeah. I rolled it out on the Glenn Beck show, went down to Dallas. He loves it.
Glenn Beck's awesome.
Anybody that's out there wants this information, they can put it right in the palm of their hands. Thank you.
And it's called the Inconvenient Facts app, right?
Yeah, just search for Inconvenient Facts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to end with one last one before we wrap this up. If they got what they wanted and we started to shut down refineries, can you just paint a picture of what that would look like?
Yeah, it's going to be ugly. It'll be, I don't know how you get your food to market. I don't know how you get, how you plow your fields. Mm-hmm. They haven't thought this thing through. It's going to be, it's
a scary thing, man. If they get their way.
They can talk all they want about it, but it's just not achievable. We can't fly airplanes with solar or wind. And I just looked. Paul Dreesen just had a new study. If we converted, just turned all the fossil fuel fired electricity generation over to wind, it would take an area 10 times the size of Arizona to do that. And that's it. This would be a bird chopping factory across the United States.
Yeah.
Any of the high flying birds, the eagles, the falcons, any of the accipiters, they'd be struck down and wiped out, which would lead to an increase in vermin and
trees. We'd be cutting down trees for heat.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic, and yet so many people are eating up this agenda. It's crazy to me. And that's exactly why I had to get you on here to address these inconvenient facts. That's what I got, brother, man. I thank you so much for blessing us with your time and your knowledge. And again, people, go check out his book, Inconvenient Facts, The Science That Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know, on Amazon. And he's got some great YouTube videos too, man. I watched that YouTube video with the graphs, all your graphs, and you had graphs, man, with data that would just rock people to their core. So
if you're gonna watch one of my videos. Watch the one about the witch hunts in the late Middle Ages,
Yeah.
where I relate there were 30 to 40,000 supposed witches killed because of climate, and then it turns out it's because of climate change. So go fascinating, fascinating. Yeah. It opens up with a clip from Monty Python. Wonderful.
Okay, I'm gonna post some links with this, but thank you again,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wrightstone. God bless you, man, and good luck on your venture. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.